While Don Jr. was in New York preparing to testify in court, his fiancée Kimberly was at the party dressed up as Trump's constituents, Snow White. Don Jr. was not at Daddy Donald's last night. The prodigal son was being grilled as part of the $250 million case against their business. But I did get some exciting news this weekend. According to a new poll from YouGov, which is a serious polling site, or they were before this, I am more popular than the President of the United States.
Jimmy Kimmel just did the unthinkable. He went after Don Jr. and his dad in one of the wildest roast sessions ever caught on camera. It felt less like late-night TV and more like a family barbecue gone completely off the rails. The grill's on fire, the ketchup's exploding, and no one even remembers who invited Jimmy in the first place. What started as harmless teasing quickly turned into a full-on comedy bloodbath. And let's just say, the Trumps definitely won't be laughing when this one's over.
This month, we'll have International Asexuality Day. I mean, because that's a big one. Don't forget that one, folks. That's basically like Christmas, Easter, Thanksgiving, all wrapped up into one special, radical, insane Democrat holiday.
No, that's right, folks. And if anyone knows special, it's me, DJ TJ. Remember the guy who keeps saying I have no ratings? Well, that makes two of us. They polled more than 1,000 people, and I lead Trump by 16 points. I'm at +3, he's at -13. Is nice, but it feels like, considering the fact that I'm not a convicted felon friend of Jeffrey Epstein, and I've never paid off a porn star or sent a team of masked goons into a park to pull an old lady away from her grandchildren, I feel like my rating should be higher, maybe, than...
If you're enjoying this video, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit that bell icon for more. Jimmy Kimmel just did something so wild, it's got the entire internet losing it. Picture this, a late-night comedian suddenly turning into a one-man political wrecking crew. His targets? Don Jr. and his father, the former president of the United States. What started as an ordinary night of jokes quickly exploded into a full-blown comedic airstrike, with every punchline landing harder than a leaked classified file.
There he is, tiny soprano. I wonder what's going through his head right now.
I should have worn makeup.
Oh, yeah, good one. Here's the thing about Don Jr. What he lacks in intelligence, he also lacks in charisma. So, and as with all cases involving the family Trump, DJ TJ was sworn in on an upside-down Bible. He will finish his testimony tomorrow, and then Eric will testify, and then Trump will claim he's never met either one of them. But it's getting serious.
Kimmel didn't just roast them. He built an entire bonfire, tossed in a few of their tweets for good measure, and lit it up with pure sarcasm. It all started with Don Jr., who's basically the human version of a Wi-Fi signal that keeps cutting out mid-sentence. Once again, he decided to step into the spotlight, convinced he could handle the heat. But Kimmel made sure that spotlight turned into a flamethrower.
Finding a toenail in your salad has a 7-point lead over Donald Trump. And I hope he doesn't see this. I hate to, I don't like to upset him, but I think he might be upset because the White House put out a statement this afternoon. This is a real statement. Over 77 million Americans showed up on Election Day to cast their ballots for President Donald J. Trump, who is delivering on his overwhelming mandate to put America first. Jimmy Kimmel prays every night to garner a fraction of that support to keep his show on air after ratings dropped 64% last week. Sad. I like sad with an exclamation point. It would make a nice t-shirt with Trump's face on it, wouldn't it?
That line alone could make a great t-shirt. Trump's face printed right on it. You could practically hear the entire PR team praying in sync while Kimmel sliced through the Trump family's chaos like a chainsaw through butter. He kicked things off with Don Jr.'s latest attempt at staying relevant, a performance fueled by way more enthusiasm than actual logic. Let's just say, if charisma were cash, Don Jr. would still be paying off debt from 2016.
Proud of the toughest person I've ever met in my entire life for having the backbone and fortitude to go through this whole mess, as uncomfortable as it's been. And I'm proud to have stood there every single second by his side in that freezing cold courtroom. He's an inspiration to me every single day, and he'll be vindicated.
In other words, Daddy, I was there, Don Jr. wasn't. He just showed up today.
Then came the moment everyone was waiting for. Jimmy turned his sights straight on the president himself, and you could tell it was about to get real. Kimmel, the same guy who once teared up over a healthcare bill, suddenly switched gears into a verbal sniper, unloading on Trump's entire personality with ruthless precision. He didn't just make fun of him. He dissected him, line by line, like someone who'd been collecting receipts since the very first fake news press conference. Every word dripped with irony, wrapped in political glitter, and launched straight toward Trump Tower. The funniest part? Trump probably loved it. This is a man who treats criticism like caffeine. He can't function without it. Every joke powers his next tweet. Every insult turns into a new rally slogan. Kimmel even roasted Don Jr. for constantly chasing his father's approval, pointing out how it's like watching a grown man audition for affection from someone whose emotional range barely exceeds that of a golf ball.
You know, sometimes we get so fixated on Trump, we forget there are other disgusting creatures hell-bent on bringing about the end of the world out there. But our president, Metamucil World Peace, is having a pretty good week, or he was anyway. Yesterday, Trump had what was easily the most presidential day of his life. He was front and center on the world stage signing a ceasefire in the Middle East, and then he got home, he started going through the internet, and he just couldn't help himself. Trump made the cover of Time magazine, which he usually loves. You know, before he was president...
That's the real genius of Kimmel's roast. He didn't need to yell, rant, or pull any over-the-top stunts. He just relied on razor-sharp, perfectly timed humor that hit like a slap you never saw coming. His delivery was pure late-night finesse. Every jab wrapped in a grin, every punchline landing with surgical precision. He painted Don Jr. as this tragic character forever trapped in his father's massive political shadow, desperate to prove he's more than Trump Jr., yet somehow always ending up proving exactly that he's not. Then Kimmel dropped the metaphors, comparing the Trump brand to an overextended reality show, technically still running. But the audience has checked out and the plot stopped making sense 3 seasons ago. The best part? He didn't even need to exaggerate. The material wrote itself. Meanwhile, the internet was losing its mind. Trump fans were calling Kimmel unhinged, liberals were hailing him like a comedic hero, and everyone else was just there for the memes. Through it all, Kimmel wasn't even mad. He just looked entertained, like he'd realized America's political circus had become the greatest reality show on earth, and he had front row seats.
They're eating their cats, they're eating the dogs. Welcome back to the program.
Charlie, I thought this was a conspiracy theory, and like all conspiracy theories, it turns out to be true.
What is going on with that lisp? A conspiracy theory, you say? Who is conspiring? Immigrants from Port-au-Prince? I mean, I read that they're roasting Irish feathers.
It's disgusting, and it should not be happening in America. It shouldn't be happening anywhere else in the civilized world, but that's the reality. Okay? You look at Haiti, you look at the demographic makeup, you look at the average IQ. If you import the third world into your country, you are going to become the third world. That's just basic. Like, it's not racist, it's just fact.
I don't know, sounds pretty racist to me.
Then Kimmel zoomed out, because he's never just roasting people. He's roasting the whole system. He took the entire Trump saga and turned it into a running joke, comparing it to a company that keeps bragging about record profits while quietly losing every customer it ever had. It was that perfect brand of satire that hits you in 2 stages. First you laugh, then you realize it's actually terrifyingly accurate. At one point, Jimmy joked that Don Jr. defends his dad like a guy brainwashed by motivational posters, always preaching about strength and success, but conveniently skipping over the parts where the economy's burning, half the cabinet's quitting, and the family business is under investigation. And just like that, the internet had a new obsession. Don Jr.'s desperate attempts to clap back only made things worse. Every comeback he posted basically proved Kimmel's points in real time. Each response sounded like a deleted scene from a low-budget reality show. It's honestly poetic. The harder Don Jr. tries to sound serious, the funnier the whole thing becomes.
Fake Time magazine covers hanging on the walls of his golf club, for real. But this one, I guess, conjured up some mixed feelings because of the photo being used. It's upset him so much that at 1:36 a.m. he posted, "Time magazine wrote a relatively good story about me, but the picture may be the worst of all time. They disappeared my hair and then had something floating on top of my head that looked like a floating crown, but an extremely small one, really weird." Now, I want to go back to that cover and show you this crown. Okay, that's not a crown, that's the letter M. Only he would see an M on his head and assume it's a crown. If that's not an M, you're on the cover of Time magazine, okay?
And Jimmy, he just stood there with that smug little grin, like a teacher watching his student trip over the same word again and again. But what really made this roast sting was the timing. With Trump's presidency already feeling like a never-ending soap opera, Kimmel had the perfect stage to work with. Inflation? He turned it into a punchline. The border? He compared it to a chaotic family road trip gone wrong. Global diplomacy? More like a toddler trying to run a lemonade stand. Every major issue became comedy gold, not because the problems were funny, but because the reactions around them were pure theater. There's something deeply satisfying about watching a comedian slice through political nonsense with more precision than most journalists manage in a week. Naturally, Trump's loyal fan base rushed to defend the family, calling Kimmel biased, jealous, or part of the deep state, which only made his point hit harder. The guy told a few jokes, and suddenly half the internet was ready to open an investigation. You can just picture Kimmel going home, pouring himself a drink and saying with that trademark smirk, "Mission accomplished." Because honestly, there's nothing sweeter than a punchline that keeps echoing for days.
Another sniveling MAGA turd who has a weird twist on our president's name is Don Jr.
Check this out. Joe Biden. 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 Joe Biden has dementia.
That's right. He's the one with the dementia. That's right. It's like he got bitten by a radioactive morning zoo or something. Joe Biden. Joe Biden. Joe Biden. Here in LA, school is out for the summer.
Meanwhile, Don Jr. jumped on social media to set the record straight, which, let's be honest, never ends well for him. His posts read like the digital version of someone who just got roasted at dinner and decided to file a complaint with the waiter. He tried spinning the whole thing into a win, but by that point, the memes had already taken over. And right on cue, Trump himself stepped in. Because of course he did. Apparently, the former president didn't appreciate Kimmel's tone, which is hilarious coming from a guy whose tone has caused more international incidents than any comedian ever could. But his reaction was textbook Trump. Another dramatic statement. Another round of media outrage. Another week of fake news rants. At this stage, it's not even a presidency. It's performance art that refuses to end. What Kimmel really exposed was the fragile ego ecosystem orbiting the Trump dynasty. Don Jr. trying to imitate his father is like watching someone do karaoke to a song nobody liked to begin with. Every time he tries to sound powerful, he ends up sounding like he's giving a TED Talk on how to completely miss the point.
Honored for wearing that tie down to your knees. Every morning is a game of who am I mad at today? Is it the Cracker Barrel logo? Is it windmills? Is it Bad Bunny? Is it the Nobel Prize? Or is it the turkey vagina slapping around under my chin? I'm not sure we're even allowed to show his neck on TV. Wouldn't it be funny if the FCC fined us for showing his neck on TV? Trump went on, I never like taking pictures from underneath angles, but this is a super bad picture and deserves to be called out. What are they doing and why? It's like he's a TikTok influencer yelling at her boyfriend for not knowing her angles.
Kimmel's jokes didn't just roast them, they exposed the tragic irony of it all. The harder they fight for dominance, the more cartoonish they become. By the end of the week, everyone was talking about it, not because it was some big scandal, but because it was just so ridiculously entertaining. Kimmel didn't take them down with anger. He did it with perspective. He showed that power, when wrapped in vanity and ego, eventually becomes its own punchline. Don Jr.'s desperate hunt for validation and Trump's obsession with control, both collapsing under the weight of their own theatrics. And through it all, Kimmel just stood there with that calm grin, like a man who knows he's tapped into an endless source of material. There's something almost poetic about it. In a world overflowing with political noise and self-importance, humor feels like the only honest voice left. And Jimmy Kimmel has mastered that balance perfectly, laughing at the chaos while quietly reminding everyone that it is chaos.
He's being held responsible for making safety last, but fortunately for him, he's got an ardent defender in one Donald J. Jr.
Pete Buttigieg, you saw in the clip earlier, he's taking some personal time because, 19 days isn't enough time. Plus the time he spent chest feeding while we were in the midst of a supply chain crisis and 350 million Americans were depending on him to do his damn job. But there is no accountability. There's not even the expectation of these guys doing their jobs.
And what is your job exactly? I mean, seriously, besides yelling at your laptop, what is it that you do for a living? What do you write on your tax return, son? Donald Trump Jr. is the only guy in America who claims himself as a dependent.
So when people say Jimmy Kimmel destroyed Don Jr. and Trump, it's not really about humiliation, it's about exposure. He basically held up a mirror, and what stared back was a chaotic mix of ego, confusion, and unintentional comedy. The roast wasn't just funny, it was revealing. Kimmel didn't go after their politics. He went after their personas, the brand, the myth. The endless performance of power that falls apart the second someone starts laughing at it. And that's why it hit so hard. This wasn't just another celebrity feud, it was a cultural moment, a reminder that comedy can slice deeper than outrage ever could. Jimmy didn't tear them down with insults. He did it with irony, truth, and timing so sharp it left a mark. The internet will move on soon enough, but this one sticks. Because honestly, Kimmel didn't even have to work that hard. The material wrote itself. The Trump family is like a never-ending reality show that doesn't realize it should have been canceled after season 1. Every episode's the same. Don Jr. trying to sound profound, Trump declaring everything's the best ever, and someone in the background still trying to figure out what the plot was supposed to be.
Meanwhile, the president has been doing his part to bring the two sides together by calling one of the sides the party of hate, evil, and Satan. Hate, evil, and Satan. And that's why they call him the peace president. Teddy Roosevelt had a press conference / pity party today. He bitched and moaned and patted himself on the back so many times he almost dislocated his shoulder. He played all the hits. He bragged about winning the elections in Georgia in 2016 and 2024. He again claimed the election was stolen from him in Georgia in 2020. The blaming and the bragging, he cannot stop.
Kimmel just stepped in and turned the chaos into punchlines, and that's what made it brilliant. He didn't need to exaggerate anything. He just shined a light on how absurd it already was. Watching Don Jr. defend his father's every move is like watching someone defend a volcano for erupting. It's just passionate, he says, as the lava burns down half the country. Kimmel saw that gap between the image and the insanity and built his entire roast right in that space. Even political pundits had to laugh because he said what everyone else was too careful to admit. The president's chaos had become its own comedy. So when people say Jimmy Kimmel destroyed Don Jr. and Trump, it wasn't because he went on some angry rant. It was because he didn't have to. That's the real lesson here. Power might make you untouchable in politics, but never in comedy. The second you start taking yourself too seriously, there's always going to be someone like Jimmy Kimmel waiting with a smirk. A perfectly timed punchline and a reminder that sometimes the funniest thing in the world is the truth itself.